Frankie. What's up, dude?
We're shaking and baking, baby. I'm proud to be here.
Yeah,
Excited.
me too. Me too. I'm really excited for this one because a lot of the notes and stuff that I have prepared for this episode are all related on like your history in the fitness business, or industry, really. Because how long have you been in the industry total?
Almost 15 years now. So started in high school.
So talk about, first of all, what even drew you to the fitness industry?
Great. That's a great one. So I had some personal health stuff go on when I was in middle school. So I went to a high school that was known for wellness and health. So back then, I mean, we had watches that you can connect to a computer and it tell you how fast you could run. And we had the health week where you did pull-ups and all that cool stuff. And man, there was this moment in my life where got really sick. I was like seventh, eighth grade and living with a single mom who's also a Latino hot-blooded mom. So
Okay.
when baby boy is sick, I mean, it's like, she's holding a water bottle next to
Mhm.
me. And man, I lost like almost 30 pounds in about a week, was hospitalized for almost 2 weeks. And they never really figured out what was going on. They just said I had rapid dehydration
Okay.
and I was taken out of all athletic sports, PE, all that good stuff. So I found a sport that I could play that wasn't requiring a lot of endurance, long bouts of exercise or exertion, and that was a paintball, like
Okay.
what you see like in those inflatables.
I feel like paintball's intense though.
Oh, paintball's super intense, but the max our games were 4 minutes, so I
Oh,
could
okay.
recover. But it was quite scary when this all this stuff kind of happened. I would lose my peripheral vision, and then I lost my ability to know if I was swallowing. It was weird. I had this weird numbness, and we couldn't quite figure it out. We had a lot of stress going on at the time, and um, just being fully transparent, my mom, she, well, man, I guess I'll give you the whole thing, but she broke up with a guy that lived in our complex.
Okay.
And seventh grade, mom's a school teacher. Now I'm in a middle school. That's not where my mom used to teach. And she breaks up with this dude, and we start getting these letters sent to the house. And pretty much they were just threatening my life, like to the extremes where they were threatening to put me in a Ziploc bag and chop me up and put me in like the back of a fridge, like crazy stuff.
Oh my gosh.
And, I was kind of the man of the household then. It was just me and her. So she was quite transparent with me at an age, which I don't know if that was the right thing or the wrong thing to do. But man, at this time I was being like police escorted on and off school campus. It was quite crazy time.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say so. And how old are you? Seventh grade?
Man, yeah. So what, 12, 11?
Yeah.
So, anywho, grandmother's picking me up from school because now this is the first time where I'm not able just to go to my mom's class like I was in elementary. So different times, and we're having to move late at night when he's gone working because since he was our neighbor, he could see kind of everything we were doing. So
Yeah.
just kind of this crazy ride. So pulled out of PE, pulled out of sports, and I start volunteering at a paintball field. So very quickly get into it. Become one of the youngest professional paintball players. Got to be featured in a video game as a character on like the original
That's
Xbox. It was great.
that's
They even
sick.
misspelled my last name, so that was even better. Garcia instead of Guerra.
Nice.
But super fun. Had a lot of fun with paintball. Loved it. Moved to Alabama for my high school year. Just needed some relocating, some fresh start.
And you started where?
In South Florida, Miami.
Okay.
So a little town called Davie. It's right in between Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
So ironically, it's kind of a Western town. So I moved even more into like a Western culture.
Yeah.
So here I am. I start this high school year in Lexington, Alabama, the LA of Alabama.
Okay.
And I'm a Latino. So they hear this Latino kid's coming. They automatically assume I've been playing sports. And I never let any of my medical stuff really translate into this move. So they had no idea. And first day of school, they put me in athletic PE. It's like a movie scene. I'm walking into the gymnasium and they're like the Miami kid, and there's whispers all around the school. Every college or every coach is there, and we're just confined into this small little area in this gym. And the coaches got their chewing tobacco in. Boy, what's it going to be? What you going to play? Basketball, football? And I'm like, well, I played basketball when I was a kid in the street, but never like in an organized sport, t-ball and that stuff. And I was like, I think basketball. And I remember a kid, like a movie, throws me a basketball as he walks out of the locker room. And I grab the basketball and dribble it with both hands. And as I shoot it with both hands and release it, as quickly as I released it, all the dreams and ambitions this school had of being like on the map because this Miami kid were
Yeah.
gone. I missed the goal. It was like
Yeah.
everything. So they allowed me to be the team manager. of the basketball team. So pretty cool. I'd already done some side gigs DJing, so I felt pretty confident on the microphone. And I got to work out with the team, and it changed my life forever. And little by little, I got stronger and was able to get over these ocular migraines and kind of this blindness and this weird sickness stuff. And it was the first time I ever got like organized exercise. So before all this, when I was a kid, my dad did boxing, and we found a local boxing gym. Now I'm in 10th grade, and me and him start going to it. And I've got a paintball field that I introduced to this little country town, and it did terrible because everybody has land. You didn't have to go pay for a field. And so one day a guy comes and rents out the field, and it's my old boxing coach. And he's like, Frankie, you're pretty good with boxing. This whole MMA thing's on the scene. What do you think about it? And I'm like, all right. So he starts coming to my garage, training me 2.5 hours a day and 4 days a week. And man, I learned really quickly 2 things. One, I hate feet.
Okay.
So if you put a toe on me, man, I'm tapping out. Like it's not my thing. And I really didn't like getting hit in the face.
No.
Like I wasn't.
And you're good looking dude too.
And man,
so
this is the money maker, right?
Yeah.
I'm like,
that's messing with your pay, man.
So we tried to translate this personal training experience into my neighbors. So very quickly, we invited all the neighbors. 20 people started coming. We had a 30-minute. You remember Billy Blank's Tybo, the DVDs? This guy was like Terry Crews back in the day, but he'd have these great DVDs he'd sell. And it was kind of like a kickboxing, a little 20, 30-minute video. I loved them. And we would do that for 30 minutes and then offer like a HIIT class with weights. And I had a little iHome and a washer and dryer inside the garage. And we would just charge $3 a class. And so we're talking $6 an hour. So 2 classes, $3 per class, 20 people. I'm making $120 an hour, 4 days a week. I'm making $500 in high school. And my trainer, he got injured. And so I started inventing my own spin on it. And I realized, man, I really like this. So 17 in 6 months. And I call Ace and NASM, and one of them was willing to give me all the credential stuff to get certified 6 months before, just to start studying. And so I started going through that whole process. And in high school, I didn't have a dedicated vehicle that I could drive. So my goal was save up enough money, get some scholarships where I could allocate some funds to buy my first car.
Yeah.
And man, it's senior year, it's spring break. And my dad, he's been pushing me. He's like, man, you should really think about like this whole gym thing, like becoming like a business. And I'm like, I just want to like live my life, be a kid. He's like, no, seriously. He's like, there's a building downtown. You should look at it. And it was an old video hop. And I was like, man, to invest my savings into a business or a car, like I'm like, the car, like who wants responsibility? And it was like probably next week, spring break week, I had nobody show up to classes. It was one person who was storming all week. And this woman, she grabs me. She's like, Frankie, you don't know what you've done for me. And I'm like, yes, I do. I'm like, the last 3 months, you've lost 5 pounds a month, total of 15 pounds. And I was just on the data on the scale, right? The things that we get caught up in. And Baker, it was like, I could feel it yesterday. Gives me chills talking about it. And she hugs me and she goes, you don't understand what you've done for me mentally and emotionally. She's like, I came from a battered, physically in a mental relationship with my ex-husband. And now I work in a hotel where I'm always taking care of people. And now I'm remarried and we've got 3 or 4 kids together. And I'm always putting everything out for everyone else. And you've built something inside me, confidence and some self-talk that I've been able to navigate. And I was like, man, I'm a knucklehead high school kid. Like if I can do this now, what else can I do? And I think very short after that, I had another interaction where a gentleman I was training walked off a pitching mound from where he was coaching his little league team for his grandkid. And he was like, man, I was never the father I was supposed to be. I was an alcoholic. And you've helped me kind of get into better shape where I can do this, go through this season with my grandson. And I was like, man, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. So birthed No Doubt Fitness. And there's a lot of doubt at the time when it comes to fitness. And I'll give you a little side background. My dad was working for a company that you've probably seen a couple of their TV shows where they sell products on the show.
Yep.
So like
QVC type.
So Home Shopping Network was who we were with. And they had a unique requirement for fitness. It had to be something that could be foldable and be easily hidden, be put in a closet or underneath your bed or something like that. And I thought, what an interesting thing. It needs to perform well, but also it needs to be something that you can, tuck away, right? Because we don't want you to, be having callbacks where something broke or, and I thought, man, what a great idea, marketing wise. But in the realm of fitness, so many things are like that you should be doing this type of diet or this type of fat or hiring this trainer or signing up for a membership, but nothing's really requiring you to come. So I started this gym in July of 2020. And man, it was the worst month. And July is not the best month. Think about it. Like, you're not trying to look good. You've already
Yeah.
gone through your summer. And I used to sit with a folding table out in front of Walmart with 5 pounds of fat and 5 pounds of muscle. And I'd point out at people and be like, you want to turn this into this, and $5 workouts. And I'd sing the jingle at the time was Subway, $5 foot long. I'd be like, $5 workouts. And man, I'd have a stack of $5 bills charging $5 for these classes and these one-on-one sessions. And nobody would come. And I was like, but man, they gave me their money. Like, I made it super cheap for everybody to have access. And I realized it wasn't a value of my time or my service. It was a value of what motivated them to come out.
Yeah. Wasn't enough pain. $5 isn't enough.
Man, well, 5 a.m., you hit the snooze, right? So went through that, and where we kind of tie together, had this gym going. I was always underweight in high school. So when I graduated, I think I was like a buck 15 maybe. I mean, what'd you graduate at?
I was probably 160, 165.
So that was my goal dream weight, that 165 with 16-inch arms. I was like, man, I'm gonna be a hit.
Yeah.
So my dad's talking at the university, and he's talking out of class. I came and sat in. He's talking to this guy, and this big guy stands up. He's like, I got a dream. I'm gonna open up a gym. It's gonna have the heaviest weights and the best protein shakes. And my dad looks at this guy. He's like, well, funny enough, my son owns a gym. He's right next to you. And that's when I got to meet Mike Krausen.
Yeah.
So me and him got a couple workouts in, and we became very quickly some good friends. And he was doing bodybuilding. We became roommates and got to learn a lot about fitness and bodybuilding and nutrition. And so I went and met with his coach, and we got on this kind of team, this MFGC, mother effing gym crew, which was just our initials put together. And it was great mentorship. It was a great way for me to get in the best shape of my life, because man, he was a drill sergeant. So we got into fitness modeling, and I got to do 13 romance novels, and he got to do several. He moved to pursue that in New York, but before he left, he already had a personal training book, and I bought it from him. I bought his book of business, and I had not really done personal training at this time. I opened up 2 supplement shops in the local gyms there, and I had my gym, which was about 30 miles away. But fast forward, it's my senior year. I'm managing a fitness model locally. And man, we go to an audition for him to audition for MTV's Real World.
Okay.
And we both get the opportunity to audition. And I'm there managing him. And they're like, both of you guys got to do it. But I learned very quickly that there's some royalty stuff that takes place. So we go through that. I get done with college in really like 3 years just to try to venture out and get done where I can do this MTV thing, and end up not going with it. Still have the gym. And it's about a month before I'm actually supposed to walk across stage, and the local gyms, they hit me up and they're like, hey man, we're closing our doors. And I thought, this is it. This is, being a personal trainer, I think it's romanticized now.
Yeah.
But at that time, not a lot of folks were like, personal training, like having a coach or having a mentor or Instagram wasn't the trend as far as getting those coaching. And I think that's the key now in our era of getting better, building those skill sets. And so I thought, I'm bowing out. This is God's sign for me to like, hey, I did it for my college career. Like, now I've learned how to market myself on Facebook and all that stuff. And so we got to the end of this trial period, and I'm telling my clients like, hey, if you want to train with me, come visit me in Lexington, about 30 minutes away. We can work out there. And gym shut down. It's Thanksgiving weekend, and we have one police officer in our town, and he's Cuban as well. And he gives me a call, and he's like, man, you must have pissed somebody off. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you need to get down here now. Somebody just drove through your building. And so no lie, like, it's a movie. It's raining. I'm driving into it, and like 2-3 miles away, I'm seeing like concrete, like in the road. And as I'm getting closer, like I pull in, and no lie, somebody missed the brake for the accelerator and literally drove through a building. Thank God nobody was injured. Guy drove away, and it was an older guy, and he called, and he thought he had hit the grocery store next door. So we found out who did it, and no big deal there. But I moved most of my workout equipment into my garage. And man, I thought, man, another reason to get out of fitness, right? Yeah. This isn't for me. And I started doing marketing and promising people to get their Google listing to be number one. And Baker, for the first time, this was I didn't have any anxiety. I wasn't waking up at 4 a.m. I was showing up to an office and I saw white walls all day. And man, I'm not gonna lie, the first little bit sounded pretty good, man. Like I didn't have that chest feeling of like I got to be somewhere, especially being out of college where we wake up and feel like we have that light switch of did I forget to study or do whatever that might be. So do this for about 3 months, and one by one, my clients I used to train at the other gyms were hitting me up and like, "Hey, we heard you moved your workout equipment to your garage. What if we just paid you just to train in your garage?" I was like, I know these folks. I don't care for them to be in my house. So I picked up a couple here, a couple there. And man, by the end of about 90 days, I had all my clients back. And I realized one thing: for us to have a prayer answered where we don't have anxiety, where we don't have that stress, we only have anxiety about things we care about. And I realized what I was doing, I didn't have any passion behind it. It wasn't a zest in the morning that I was waking up for.
Yeah.
So I kind of backed away from that and just went all in on personal training.
That's awesome.
It was crazy. I had these two big no's, and I get a phone call, and the lady is like, "Hey, I'm looking for a trainer, and I recommend a place down the street." She's like, "No, I want something more private." And I have no idea who this lady is. She's making all these big promises that she knows a lot of my clients, but none of them by name.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, all right, I'll take the bait. I'm like, well, I do have a private studio at my house. Right when I said that, Baker, she spouted off my address, 309 Madison Avenue. I'm like, ma'am. She's like, I'm with the city. I'm a code enforcer for nuisance, and you're in violation of XYZ. You can't be running a business out of your house. You need to shut down immediately. And I'm like, I thought this was my calling. I thought I was back in alignment.
Yeah.
So find a little spot down the street that's literally $300 a month. It's like 900 square feet, the same size as my garage. And I start training out of it, just personal training. And man, at this point, I wasn't even exercising myself. I was just any hour I could sell. I wasn't working myself out. I was literally just drinking protein shake after protein shake and got into some pretty bad health. And met a buddy that was at a college class with me. He was going into the military special forces. So I hired him to pick up 2 days a week. And there was a unit coming up for rent next door. And I was like, man, I want to do another service, because entrepreneurship, we want to have all these businesses and all our hands in different things. And especially what I had in my mind of success wasn't money. It was being busy, having all these different revenue streams. And so I wanted to put in a travel agency or sell supplements or something different. And here, this military guy, he's like, man, what if you did another personal training studio? I'm like, dude, no way that would work. 2 full-time trainers? Never. He's like, you already got the equipment. What do you have to lose? Well, all right, let's just go ahead and do it. Within a couple months, we had that second facility completely rented out and he was booked. So I knew he was leaving eventually to join the military. And man, another door opened. We had a guy that had rented a building and he was trying to create a drop-off location for a laundromat. And he just literally needed a spot to drop things off, but it was a huge building. He's like, why don't you just rent the back half? I was like, all right. So rented that building with him the first month. And I'm talking about like massive building. We only needed 1,600 square feet. It's like 6,000 or 7,000. And within a month, that company sells the laundromat. So I'm like, here I am with this huge building, this huge node. And we did something kind of different. All I knew was personal training in a garage style building. So I built this big open facility into 5 personal training rooms the size of a garage. So truly private. My goal was to build walls, to tear down walls of intimidation where people can come get really one-on-one attention. And it was really for people that maybe felt insecure in a big box gym, maybe had some unique injuries. And we were really doing it to just help people get into the gym, really lose their doubts, be their doubtless self. And man, as a byproduct of years of doing it, it kind of made us a little bit more elite. Mm-hmm. And we never went that route. It just kind of catered to that market and that audience. So now most folks come for that elite and exclusive experience. But just kind of give you a quick recap on where that was.
Yeah. So many things there that I want to kind of dissect. You guys were doing private on a large scale. You were doing private training. So you had broken up all of these different rooms into like a private garage style type gym.
Yes. So you can't see the other person working out. The music's catered to your liking, the temperature, like everything's laid out just for you. And even the equipment, it was just It was just basic stuff you could fit in your garage, not a
Mhm.
whole lot of machines. And people really liked that, even though I was like, man, I'm getting this stuff from for a steal. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
like commercial grade stuff, but also not a bunch of commercial machines.
Mhm. Wow, that's very different. So I know one of the things that I want you to kind of talk about with fitness, because you talked about like your passion and why it kept kind of like drawing you back in. Something that's so different. I've never heard it put this way before, and I wish I could remember the exact person. I know I've narrowed it down to three people. I heard this quote, or this, I guess, just thought. It was either Chris Williamson, Andrew Huberman, or Jordan B. Peterson. I listened to a lot of the three of
Love
them,
them.
but I think it was Huberman. I think it was on his podcast at least, and I don't remember who he was talking to, but he they were talking about fitness is so different, specifically strength training. It's like the only thing that you can do on earth that at the end of every session, every day, you get a glimpse into what your future can look like if you keep going. Just and they're talking about like the pump.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's like one of the only things on earth. Like you can go. I don't even know what the example that they use. Like you can work all day, right? Let's just use like professional world, right? Like you can work all day, and at the end of the day, or for 20 or 30 minutes during your day, you're not going to see what's going to happen if you keep working for the next 5 years. Like you're not going to get a glimpse into that version of you. You're not going to get a glimpse into like if you're out cycling, what it would be like to like win a race that's 2 years off that you're not even close to like being prepared for. But at the end of your workouts, if you're lifting weights specifically, you get the pump, and that shows you like
A little
a year
trailer.
down the road, 2 years down the road, like this is what you're going to look like just normally. And I thought that was kind of a very interesting way to like frame just fitness in general. What do you think about that kind of concept, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to tell you, I love watching movies,
Mhm.
but if I could spend 2 hours of my time, it'd be watching trailers, right? Getting a little taste of it. And I feel like, just like you said,
Yeah.
getting that little taste of what what are we going to look like at the end of this? One thing I love to do is we use a body composition machine.
Yeah.
And if somebody has a negative body comp, we make them go work out and then immediately get back on there. And then all of a sudden, what's going to happen? Muscle mass is going to show you produce more red blood cells, like all this stuff.
Hmm.
And again, they actually didn't build more tissue, just like you said, a little
Yeah,
tease
showing
of it.
it.
And then all of a sudden, like, man, I'm right there. And it's just putting that time in, pounding that pavement to actually make it something that's long term. That's why I always love, you hit the gym before you go on a date night or whatever, but you go in
Yeah.
the shower for a minute and you kind of deflates. You're like, do I just risk not having the shower and a little smelly? But there's a lot of ways that I think we look for gratification. And I think it's changed so much with having a great podcast. All of a sudden you get great reviews or putting
Yeah.
something on Facebook. But there's an unredeemable commodity, our time, our energy that we put into working ourselves out. That there was a guy, man, I can't think of it. He always did these funny and sometimes inappropriate fitness videos, but he talked about, at first the guy that maybe was insecure working out, he just wanted to, get some more attention from girls or whatever that was dating. And then all of a sudden, he starts getting more attention from the guys in the gym and you realize, man, bro science, the guy that did
Mhm.
bro science.
Yeah. Is it Dom?
Yes,
Yeah.
Bazzetti or something like that.
Yeah. Dom Mazzetti. Yeah.
Yeah. And man, he always had some great stuff that was really making fun of, but it is the evolution. A lot of times we start with very personal reasons. And then all of a sudden we're like, man, I don't even just care about the attention from dating, but the attention that we're getting from being successful in the gym. Now you're an actual gladiator in this arena and you're seeing the weights go up. You're seeing your confidence go up. You're seeing
Mhm.
that endorphin release. And a lot of
And your
times,
body change, like
oh man,
just change. Like that was one of the biggest things that got me stuck in it. And I'm sorry to cut you off. That was one of the biggest things that made me stay with it was being able to see something tangible for the work that I was putting in that was somewhat, intangible, right? And that's the equation that I think you're kind of alluding to is just the hard work and consistency over time equaling results. And it draws that like link in your head that just spills over into everything. Like that changed everything for me. Realizing like, yeah, it might be a little bit boring. Yeah, it might hurt while I'm doing it, but if I just do this thing, I get this result. I just have to do it enough times. And it's just a gift. Like it just happens like magically, in my head at that point. So I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's, I think the equation that's behind all of it.
And it teaches you so many other things. Patience, right? It teaches you just when you got those off weeks when you're just not seeing that needle move on the scale or in those
Yeah.
photos, and just kind of being good and faithful to it and just putting that time in. But kind of circling back, you know, I always like to know why somebody started. Why did they start this fitness venture? And I know a lot of times in the consultation of fitness, sometimes people don't spend enough time not knowing why they're doing it, but how are they going to celebrate it once they get there?
Hmm.
And I remember the day I finally hit 165 and 16-inch arms. And one of the things I would do is I'd write it 10 times on my paper that I'd submit at school. And the teacher would always like, call me out, Frankie, why did you write your name 10 times and write this weight? And I was like, because when you see me, teacher, that's what you're going to see 165 with 16-inch arms. And I remember the day I achieved it. And my roommate at the time, he was probably 100 pounds. Yeah, he outweighed me by 100 pounds by that time. And he was going for an opportunity at his pro card in bodybuilding. And I remember him. We had this like humbling moment of realizing sometimes once you get there and you realize how much work you got to continue to do to get to that next level. And for him, it was possibly pursuing a bodybuilding pro card, and physique was on the rise. And I remember there's a moment where you have to choose, are you going to be disgruntled with having to put more work in because you know what you've done,
Yeah.
like to get to that weight or to get to that physique, and then you got to go like, man, this was brutal, this was like tough,
Hmm.
this was tough. And do we want to put in the time and effort into getting us to be that elite level? And I think that's one thing that, man, beyond all reasonable doubt, what do you want to do? What is that thing that is going to move that needle a little bit more? Or is it just being grateful for what you did accomplish and realizing I need to celebrate this moment?
Yeah. I there's another quote. I'm gonna butcher it because I don't have it up in front of me, and I usually am so prepared with my quotes. But there's a quote that explains exactly what you just talked about. With it basically is the the greater, the better, the more successful that you get, the more you become aware of all of your inadequacies and how far you have to go. And it's like as you do get further and further along in business and fitness and whatever, you do understand now what it took to get to even like where you're at right now, 20 levels down the road. And so then you look at somebody that's 50 levels down and you're like, holy shit, like I have so far to go. Like it took me that long to get here. Imagine how long it's gonna take me to get to like that. So it really does show like your cockiness and your confidence. Like, yeah, you can build that stuff from building it up from like the hard work and just, Hormozy says that stack of undeniable proof. But you also learn, it also teaches you a certain level of humility too, because you realize every new level you're unlocking new challenges, new things you have to overcome, new things you have to learn. And so you're like, I kind of don't have everything figured out, and nobody really has everything figured. Like we're just all learning and trying to figure this thing out together. And I think it's kind of if you're just starting out, it can be kind of a discouraging quote. I feel like, because you're like, so I never am going to feel like I've made it or have it or have done it. But it's also kind of relieving too, because if you know everyone else is in the same boat, just trying to figure it out and just trying to make it on their own too, like in their own way, in their own path, it also is encouraging to me to know that like, okay, there's not one path to get to where I want to get. Like I can carve my own path. I can go my own route. I can figure out my own way to get to where I want to go.
It's funny. You and I went to that conference not too long ago, and when I walked in, I was a day late. We had all this trouble, and the first thing I heard the speaker say, I believe it was Ed Milet.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he made a comment. He's like, I've realized with all the successful people I've been around, on podcasts and meetings, he's like, nobody knows what they're doing. And the quicker you realize that, the probably the further ahead you're going to get. But man, I just copied something the other day that kind of coincides with a little bit of what we're talking about. But the reason you're confused about what opportunity to pursue is that your only goal is to make more money. And since there are so many ways to do it, you can't figure out which one to pick. And I think so many times we're trying to go on one measurable scale, like what do we want right now? And for me, I really don't enjoy that much of social media posting. Like I know the value of like a
Yeah.
personal brand, and um, I think right now I look back on Frankie 10 years ago, and I see some of the stuff I put out, And I'm like, man, the things I knew in nutrition that were certifiably, like, I knew there was data backing this, that are so wrong. I remember I had a professor at one of my senior level classes, and it was a nutrition or human performance class. And for the first couple weeks, for his attendance protocol, he would have a question that he would ask, and you had to answer it to be counted present in the class. And the first thing he asked was, "At what age do you want to die?" And I was like, "Ooh, we're starting a little morbid."
Yeah.
And one thing that amazed me was so many people put such a low number. It was 50 or 60, or some maybe even ventured 70. Had a great grandmother pass away in Cuba, and she was 103. So I'm like, I want to beat her by at least 1 year. 105 is what I'm shooting
Yeah.
for. And then the next thing he asked was, what what do you want to die from? And majority of the things that we were going to die from were all things that we could realistically, make some life decisions to go around, whether that was hypertension or some sort of heart disease or something like that. And then the last week was explaining to us and making us read all these studies why fitness was bad. You only had so many ticks in your heart. And I'm like, does this guy not realize we're all in here to promote like health and wellness? And it was such a great thing because it challenged you in knowing what you thought you knew. And here you're having to research all the things that go against it. And then the rest of the semester was, the disbelief and deconstruction of all these studies that were not accurately stated.
Yeah.
And I think so much of that is what we do in life, right? We realize like we get to a point where we want to learn more, and we realize how little we actually know. And man, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I'm like, I wish I didn't know. I wish we
Mhm.
didn't know some of the scariness and like having kids in your household, and everything's Disney World and you want that for them, but then you realize how much of it isn't Disney World.
Yeah.
And the reality is we don't know that much. And it's it's an interesting place and a mindset to put yourself in as, I don't know anything. I'm a student of life. And kind of going to personal training, one thing that's always kept me so passionate and so humble to be in these rooms with these clients. Obviously, if you can afford a personal trainer, you've done something. You've done something in your life to be able to invest in yourself,
Yeah.
and you're at a place where you feel like you can make those pivots. So you're in a place where you can heart check yourself, realizing I need professional help. But more than anything, a lot of these people, I'm scared to say this live, but I feel like we should be paying them.
Mhm.
They're pretty big gladiators in their space, whether a doctor, a lawyer, a bank owner, whatever that might be, or a mom managing a household of 6 kids.
Yeah.
How do they do it? But they're paying us for something, and we have the ear of them to ask them questions on things. And man, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for those connections and clients that helped me get a bank loan when I needed to, or help me balance, a checkbook, or really, man, even clean up the way I speak and carry myself, and things that, I think all parents have their best at heart for us, but getting other people that you're like, oh man, I'm hearing the same stuff my mom and dad told me, or
Yeah.
family
It
members, or
helps.
yeah, and it kind of puts a different color to it. But I think I think that's one thing that we always have to be checking ourselves. Is this a belief that really serves me? For a long time, I thought a mentor was somebody that believed the same things, that was doing the same things as you. And I think now it's somebody that challenges, puts those little rebuttals in, is like, do you really think this is the right way of doing it? And you got to second guess yourself. And I go to a life coach every other week, and one thing I try to do is get there about 15 minutes early, and I just word vomit everything that's going on in my life, regardless if I plan on talking to her about it. And I've learned that we go through cycles. I got a family member that's been married a bunch of times, but he always marries the same time of year. It's spring. And I realize it's mating season. Our primal instinct is, we're getting warmer weather. We're wanting to get
Yeah.
out. And so I see myself go through mental battles where, sometimes we have that seasonal depression, where it's, we see that gray sky, and all of a sudden we start, getting a little bit more doubtful and unmotivated.
Mhm.
But, keeping ourselves alive and learning throughout those seasons of life and documenting it so that we know, like, man, I've been here before. This mindset's just temporary. It's not actually uh, a bad life or a bad time. It's just a moment in what I'm passing through, a season.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so important to remember those things. You talked a little bit about social media, and I want to talk about the fitness industry as a whole when you started out in it, right? Because that you talked about, you doing the modeling thing. You talked about even managing a model. You talked about romance novels and things like that. And I want to talk about, give me like a snapshot and give the listeners a snapshot of what was it like in the fitness industry at that point? Did you feel super connected to the industry as a whole? Did you even feel like it was an industry then?
Oh man, that's good. That's good. So
Because now we can look at the collective. We can look at social media and be like, yeah, this fitness industry is a behemoth. You know, all these clothing brands and all these people and all these trainers and all these, products that are out. But like, what did it feel like back then?
at that time, we didn't even realize how easy it was. And I feel like, now knowing, I was like, man, why didn't I hit the record button more often? Uh, Going back to Mike, he somehow was the 100th like on this guy named Golden Sesmark. He was in Huntsville, Alabama. He owns Furious Photog. I think he's got 2 million followers or something like that. But Mike was his 100th like, and he offered us to do a fitness modeling shoot. He's never done it before. And now I think Golden's like one of the biggest fitness photographers, and he's fantastic. And Mike was like, man, I'm not doing this. And I'm like, dude, I've been working my tail off living with you. Like, you're making me diet, weigh everything. Like, I'm like, if you don't do it, I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, fine, we'll do it together. And we did. And he shot some stuff and it kind of exploded. We didn't know at the time what like pages were or any of that. And this guy was like, we need to direct this traffic somewhere. Go ahead and like open up a couple pages. And I think like within a month, we had like 7,000 people. It was crazy. And that fitness model page for me had, I want to say 25 or 26,000 people on it. And then we started getting asked to like, do these photo shoots, and they would give us a theme. Hey, you're Gabriel, and you're a helicopter pilot, and the authors would want to connect you personally to this stuff. And man, as a young man, it made me honestly really respect young celebrities, Justin Bieber's of the world, Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Because man, you're this young kid that's got some confidence, and you're quite arrogant, and you're thinking, man, I've got some attention now. I've got a platform. I got a voice. And man, we started, doing these romance novels. And at the time, like 50 Shades of Grey was just getting out. So they were kind of risque. And I remember one of the authors was like, do you know what BDSM was, or M? And I'm like, is that like a music? Is that like the sound stuff?
It sounds like one.
And she like laughed because we were so green. And I remember at one point, I got an offer from a guy that ran a website, and I got to tell you, I'm like in Bible Belt, Alabama, right?
Yeah.
And this guy offers me $400 an hour for me to film me popping balloons with workout clothes, like literally in a gym room, just stepping on them. And I called my mom and my dad, and my mom, of course, is like, well, "What's it going on? Like, that's crazy amount of money. There's got to be something negative to this." And I remember calling my dad, and he's like, "I'll do it for half the price with you, son." He's just like, "What is this?" And I remember you start realizing you're exposing yourself to the world, even though you haven't had these like childlike gloves. There's not this, somebody's always looking out for your best interest, not for you now, safety wise, but how do you want to be carried later on in life? And I never did it. But I remember just wondering like, man, that's crazy amount of money just to pop balloons. Right. And so at this time, I remember when this shift changes, you couldn't pay for ads at this time. So when I would make a post, man, you're getting like 1,500 likes immediately within the hour, and your phone's just literally just vibrating with all these people. And then all of a sudden, when you started to boost, it was like they took away your microphone, and the people halfway through couldn't hear it unless you had inertia, you had some momentum. And it started to become work, right? And I thought I had the game figured out.
Yeah.
And I got up to like running 27 pages, and I realized I would do these Zoom calls, or at the time it was Skype, right? Remember those days? That's retired now. Yep. And I would do like $150 for like a 30-minute or 45-minute Skype where I would teach nutrition. And the people that were asking me cared nothing about bettering their health. They just wanted to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was kind of cheapening. And I remember it wasn't, what I learned or what I did with my own physique. And I'll never forget, I dieted really, really hard, hired a specific coach for this shoot. And all the comments I got back were how great my eyes looked. And I'm like, I didn't work for my eyes. Y'all don't see all this. Like, I got abs, right? And it really The first part of it bothered me because they didn't see the hard work. But then the second part was like, well, man, it's kind of the whole package, right? It's the bow on top, it's the cherry, or whatever that might be. But as I had to realize fitness was going to be an income in my passion and career path, I had to choose who Frankie was. You see, the page that had 25,000 followers or likes was a lust driven audience. And they didn't want to share Frankie. I was their Frankie.
Yeah.
And I remember I sold like 1,400 of these magazines. And they had, not magazines, calendars, 18-month calendar. And every day had a different workout. And nobody cared anything about the workouts. That took me the longest time. All the
Yeah.
images were easy. I already had them stock. And I sold it out, and it helped me pay for some things, some debts I was trying to go through in college. And once I realized, like, if I'm going to do this private personal training route, I need to be seen as a professional in the industry, and I needed to very quickly uh, take down this lust-driven Frankie.
Hmm.
And then I still got that page, and I've never really scrubbed it. It's like 25,000 people. I don't know how many is on it now, but um, I've just let it sit, and I've realized that wasn't the direction I wanted to go. Especially being in the private personal training business, how did I want to be viewed in my city? And it's different. You gotta start equating what that time looks like, as far as a value of what my audience wants to be. And it wasn't as sexy. It wasn't as sexy as a young man. But even entrepreneurially, there wasn't like fitpreneurs, right? There wasn't like this idea of like having your own business. I'll tell you who I looked up to then. Do you know who Greg Plitt was?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was paying $7.99. He had 14,000 subscribers. He was my hero. I would watch every bit. May he rest in peace.
Yeah.
But literally, Mike would always make fun of me. He's like, "Man, you got a crush on this dude." I'm like, "Dude, this guy's awesome." I literally had a picture of him on my ceiling, and I did two things. I had a $1 bill, and I wrote behind it 5 zeros,
Hmm.
and I put a time on there. And then I had his image, and I put 6% body fat, 16-inch arms, 165 pounds. And my goal was, the last thing I wanted to see was my dreams. And the first thing I wake up to, I wanted it to be my dreams. And I remember when I got to make that, $100,000, like I'm doing it. And I remember, it's funny, I just found a piece of paper moving some things around where I was content if my gym just made 1,200 bucks. And I remember like how happy I was when I hit that, and we continue to move that needle, whether it's Facebook likes or followers. But the social media stuff that really has got me now is, man, you need to have a pro. If you're not willing to develop how to market that, you got to have somebody in there telling you, like, and you got to be coachable.
Yeah.
And I think in the fitness industry, that's one thing. We become experts at transforming our own life, maybe the clients in our community, but all of a sudden, the animal of social media, things are changing. How you sell a product versus how you sell a product, very, very different. And I think you got to have somebody dedicated to implementing, testing these things, split testing them at such a more rapid rate. I think social media, I remember another guy that was on the scene for a hot minute, Ty Lopez,
Yeah.
and he's responsible for a bunch of people reading books. But more than anything, I remember a guy in my hometown. Maybe you can hit on this. This is more of your expertise, but he signed up for his program. I think at the time the goal was like to make 30 or 40 grand in 90 days, and Ty was doing this whole launch, and he only made like 4 grand, and he got to be a testimonial on one of Ty's things, and he blew up. He had all these people reaching out like, "How did you make 4K a month? I'm not trying to make 30 or 40 or $100,000."
Hmm.
And the biggest regret he had was blowing up too soon to not have a net
Yeah.
to capture these leads. And I know we always want our first podcast to go viral, our first picture, our first post, whatever. But then if your audience can't consume anything, um, this is pretty cool. I just hired my first social media manager
Yeah.
full time,
Yeah.
and she's all about like pulling old stuff. And I'm like, but that's terrible. Like my numbers were inaccurate. And I remember, that same class I took, he brought a certified statement from the general surgeon back in the 70s saying that smoking cigarettes was good for you because it burns off cancer cells in the lungs.
Hmm.
I mean, look at where we're at now, 30, 50 years later,
Yeah.
where we know that's not true. And so, like for you guys, when you're seeing the social media stuff, you guys are seeing it firsthand. Like, to grow too fast, especially in the social media world. I mean, what are you guys telling your clients? Like, hey, you want to have a certain amount of content or likes before you really start hitting those home runs.
It's it's so tough. And we were just talking before we even pressed record here that so for those of you guys that listened to the previous episode, episode 24, I did with my friend. His name's Hunter, but he goes by Haylight. And the way I was so captivated by just the way that he looks at content, and it made so much sense to me because it's the same way that I look at like the psychology of sales and funnels and just like copy and marketing. And so I really was like, okay, I need somebody that looks at stuff the same way that I look at it. That I'm helping all these business owners improve their businesses. If I can just figure out and crack the code on how to apply that same mindset to my content, like he does. So I call him up after the podcast and I'm like, dude, I'll pay you whatever. Like let's just like help me, figure this out. And he talks about it on the episode, but he had somebody that helped him out, um and so he just wanted to kind of pay it forward. And so I plan to do the same thing if once we kind of get going. But it there is so much. Like we've had two calls so far. Because it's only been a couple of days. We've had two calls so far, and he has just and I respond to these types of things. He has just ripped my everything that I've ever tried to create and thought was like
Oh,
super cool, just ripped it to shreds. And I told you like he'll show me like one of my favorite videos that I've ever made was about you don't always have to work hard, right? Like it's not always about the hardest worker in the room. It's who has access to the biggest levers,
mm,
right? And those levers can be people, they can be strategies, they can be tactics, they can be knowledge, books. Like it just what matters is like you can have somebody that's over here, right? Working all day at like cutting through this floor, and you give them a fork, right? Getting tunneling out of here, and then somebody over there has a jackhammer, right?
busting
And
through.
who's working harder? The fork guy is working way harder, right? But the jackhammer guy's done in 10 minutes and ready for the next task. And so it's just like they have different levers, they have different things that they're being able to use. And so I made a video talking about that kind of concept. And anyways, I started the video by saying, I was thinking really hard about something the other day, and he's like, "Tell me what's wrong with this." And he presses play, and it says, I was thinking about something really hard the other day." And he presses stop, and he's like, "What's this video about?" And I'm like, and I know exactly where he's going. I'm like, "We don't know yet." And he's like, "Exactly." He's like, he's like, second of all, who cares what you were thinking about the other day? He was like, "I've never seen your face before. Most people on the internet have never seen your face before." He was like, "I'm not being just trying to be disrespectful, but like," and I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm just trying to be like Alex Ramosi, like the gym bro that always also talks about." And he's like, and I even said, "I'm not on that level yet. I know, but I'm trying." And he said, "Stop. What did you just say?" I said, "Alex Ramosi." He's like, "No, the other thing. I'm not on that level." He's like, "You're not on that level." People stop on Hormozi's videos now at the point where he's at because they see his face and they're like, "That's Hormozi, like
Yeah.
that's the guy." And like he has some of that now that's at his disposal. You have none of that, Baker. Like we want to get you there, but no one cares what you're thinking about the other day. And if they don't know exactly what this video is going to be about in the first couple of seconds, you have to buy every 2 to 3 seconds of somebody's attention. You have to give them something to make them stay for the next 2 to 3 seconds, every 2 to 3 seconds. And I mean, the way that he approaches his content is he literally writes a script about an idea, meets with his production team and refines the script. He then storyboards it like you would a movie. And these are for like 60
Wow.
second, 90-second pieces, right? Like not a YouTube video. Like he does that for YouTube videos too. Not a movie, not anything that's like an hour long. Like this is like for a reel or like a TikTok. He storyboards it, and then he has his team go over like the storyboards and refine that. And he showed me like one of his edits. He's like, "Dude, this is version 9 of this edit, and I hate it. And it's supposed to come out in 4 days." He was like, "Whenever you watch this video, whenever it actually comes out, it's gonna feel so much more natural, so much better. It's gonna be a completely different feeling piece." And that's the difference between something that gets 100,000 or a million views and something that gets 90 million views, like these other videos that I posted. And it's just crazy to look at it from that perspective. But I hear people all the time talk about the time that you're talking about in social media, where it was like mapped out and you just had to post and all of your followers saw every post and they all liked it no matter what time of day it
You had all
was,
their
right?
eyes.
Yeah. You had all of their, you didn't have to play any algorithms because it was just if somebody's following, they see your stuff. And I wish I had been more active at that point. You know, I'm in high school and I'm not thinking about any of these things, right? I'm just like trying to enjoy. Plus, playing basketball. I thought I was going to be, I thought I was going to the NBA, like every other, small town basketball player thinks. But it's a completely different world now that I'm trying to learn to navigate. And I have almost 5,000 followers, which is like more than a lot of people, but it's like nothing compared to a lot of the people that I'm competing with. And what I see too, to your point, is the people that are doing it right, like my friend, are building up the personal brand first and then launching and monetizing off of that. The people like myself, right, like you, like Mike, we've focused on the business side because we're like, I see what these people are doing. I want to go and make that amount of money or make that amount of impact or make that whatever. And left the personal brand side behind and now trying to figure that out. It's like we're so behind the curve in terms of I can't even imagine what AR would look like if Mike and I had 100,000, two hundred
Oh
thousand, a
man,
million followers each.
for
Like
sure.
all of a sudden it's a completely different business model. Like everything can be low ticket, like what you're talking about. We could sell the just like $5 lead magnets. And if 0.5% of our audience buys, we have a
Rock and
seven
roll,
figure
yeah.
business, baby. Like this is a totally different conversation. Um, so it's a totally different landscape and it evolves so quickly that it's very hard for me to keep a finger on the pulse of it, I find. And I have to, like, that's part of my job, like you're saying, is to figure out, is to stay on some kind of the cutting edge of like what's happening with these platforms to make sure that all of our coaches know the most up-to-date stuff. And we know a lot of things that could have helped people blow up. Like we've got some clients that have blown up and everything just by using our tactics, but it's also being able to not only understand the broad concepts, but like the broad concepts, whenever you apply it to my niche or the things that I'm trying to say, aren't always going to work. It's going to be different strokes for different folks. It's just different. So I know that was like a really long-winded, roundabout kind of winding road there, but it is something I've thought about a lot recently, specifically because I'm having these calls with him where it's like blowing my mind the way that people look at content that actually rely on this content going mega viral.
And trying to forecast that, right? You come out with something that's fantastic. And I think the bar's never been so low for opportunity to be in front of people's eyes. But the problem is you might be able to be in front of them, but how do you have the bar or the demand to fulfill it over and
Yeah,
over and over again so that they remember, like, man, this is the guy that wanted me to do the thing that he was telling me to do. And it's unbelievable how quickly we can get that information, spit it right back out. And then we're like, man, I always compare it to like you have the urge to go to the kitchen and grab something, but then you see the
yes,
dog spilt, and so you spill whatever you're cleaning it up, and then you're like, man, what did I come down here for? And I think that's almost how we are when we open up social media. Man, I was going to respond to this person, and I got this video that man, this went down this rabbit hole, and then I'm like, man,
do that
I think I'm
all
gonna
the
buy a
time.
truck today, right? All of a sudden, I'm sending my girlfriend. Oh man, it's always a trip because then you're like, man, I had way too much time today, or I was really really unfocused.
Yeah, but that so another thing that you said that I think is really impactful, and it's something that a lot of probably listeners of this podcast, listeners of Mike's podcast, are our clients. We had a call on it this week, and it's how to be position yourself as a professional on social media, not just another influencer. Because we have influencers that come to us that if you looked at their page, you'd think like this person is crushing it. They're probably doing 5 figures a month and maybe even 6 figures a month, and they have a huge business probably, and they've got like no motion on the business side. And it's the exact same concept of what you're talking about of like your page and what did you want to be known for. Like we had a guy that signed up last week that he's a model, and his entire bio was all of the different model agencies that he uses across the country. And he was under the impression he knew that he had to have it somewhere. He was under the impression that it had to be in his bio. And he's
Ooh,
wanting to be a coach, and he's got like I think he had like 100,000 people on that Instagram account. So he thought that he had to start a new account that was just for fitness. And he's like, managing these two accounts just sucks. And I'm like, what, do you want to be a model or do you want to be a coach? And he's like, I want to be a coach. I'm like, you have 70,000 people over here, dude, that only think that you're promoting other people doing modeling. Like that's all you're promoting with this page. You don't even have anything personal in your bio at all. And so we talked about it and worked on ways to optimize that. But that's what a lot of people fall into. And my sister even struggled with it early on. Her first several videos that went viral, and for probably the first 6 months to a year of her account, it was all dudes, thirsty dudes. Just like they're not going to buy anything.
Yep.
They're not going to sign up for coaching. They're just going to send her DMs that she doesn't want to receive, you know?
Right.
And so it took a lot of convincing you have to have that trade off of, especially with women, and men too, because like what you're talking about, it feels really good to get the metrics. It feels really good when something goes viral, and you don't always care like why it went viral. You know, I know Mike's had some stuff that's kind of popped off, and he's gotten a bunch of DMs and followers that he maybe wasn't really trying to attract. But it is all about like if you can sacrifice a little bit of virality to position yourself as an authority, or even mix in a good amount of both, like stuff that has the potential to go viral, but then everyone that comes there because of the viral post, and then they see like, oh, Frankie, like, yeah, he looks good, but he also is like super freaking smart. Like the next 3 videos I got from him or saw from him are all him doing talking head content, talking about him working with his clients, getting crazy results, or him doing this new diet that's like really working well for all of his people. And like that's how you really position yourself as an authority, is by more hours of yourself on the internet doing the things that make you a professional or that make you good at what you do.
It's an undeniable stack you were talking about.
Exactly. So that's something that we actually talked about this week with our clients.
It's funny, you know, we talked about writing books and what that would look like, but we never feel like we're worthy enough or an authority enough to write the book.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if we write the book, we become the authority, and then we can redefine what that looks like, or reinforce why we wrote the book and what our ideas were behind it. But I mean, I want to keep writing with that. So you just hit on a bunch of good stuff. You asked me earlier how social media has kind of changed, right? And how fitness people are kind of looked at today. And I see, so we get these, when we first started expanding our personal training team, we would only get senior level university kinesiology, human performance guys, and we put them through an internship. And we were like a mill. We would have 8 to 12 of these guys a year. We'd pay them like we would a trainer and hope to keep them. And then when COVID broke out, we no longer were able to do that because they weren't doing in-person internships. So it kind of changed the game for us. But it was always interesting because they believed that their undeniable stack of credibility was them being in school for this, them being, and I remember I had this guy, he was brilliant. I mean, truly like wouldn't drink red Gatorade because of the dye and just like the guy. And I remember one day we got a new piece of equipment. And this guy, he told me from our first interview, he's like, I can talk about anything to anyone about fitness, nutrition, whatever, but I can never sell. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, my dad and I would have to raise money for a little league football team and like go door to door. He's like, I couldn't do it. My dad had to. He's like, as long as you could like sell me, I'm there. And one day we had this heart to heart because I just had this amazing amount of respect for him. But he never had a presence in our facility, only in his training room. So he'd train his clients and like people loved him. And I remember we got this piece of equipment. And he was like, dude, this is going to change the game. Like when people realize what this can do. And it was a mat that you could lay on and it would help you recover and blah, blah, blah. And we weren't able to advertise it because COVID. And he's like, man, this sucks. Like, I hate that we have this amazing thing and nobody gets the word out. And I was like, you're that amazing thing. You're the thing that has all of this, and it has nothing to do with your certifications or the school you went to or summa cum laude and the dean's list or the president of the fraternity. It's all of this, like the time in the game that you've put in to better your craft. And I don't think we do a good job self-evaluating how much credit We have, and that goes back into like that imposter syndrome. And
Yeah.
man, I love to travel. That's what I live for, and I love to travel just so I can eat different food. So it's really the food. But I've always had a fear that I'd come back to my business and forget how to do the basics. You know, what if I just forgot? You know, and every time that I leave and come back, I'm like, I know how to do it. I know how to do it. And I think a lot of that is that fear is also, if you can translate it and sell it back to yourself, as growth.
Yeah.
That feeling of like, man, if I lose this, well, if I lose that, that's a value. So why don't I realize like, man, I have that value and I'm not forgetting it. I'm only going to sharpen and encourage my craft. And you know, talking about the fit entrepreneur and all that, I've owned 9 other companies, and for the most part, none of them have been correlated to my passion. I feel like I was robbing from the thing I love the most to try and do all this other stuff because I knew a little bit about social media and I thought I knew about marketing and I thought, you know, it's the same thing. And I was passionate about the other thing because I believed that I was still helping people on different businesses, but I was really just trying to make an excuse for being distracted, and I had sold myself to be busy in these other things. I was just really a sucky trainer. I was a sucky business owner because I was trying to go these different routes. And now I'm like, how do I just make everything correlated to what I believe my purpose and my passion is, and where I'm able to make the biggest impact with fitness. So now my goal is, how many times can I create the same amount of impact going deeper rather than wider? And I know we hear about, you know, Bedros and Amazon and all these guys that make all this wealth, but they started with one thing they were really great at. And of course, you know, we've heard it, you know, if you increase your time horizon, you know, that you're going to be successful at it. It's undeniable the
Yeah.
time. But I am going to give you this. You coming from a training background, you know, we're rewarded, like you said, that one guy with the jackhammer, he's efficient, he's using it, but the other guy, he's scooping it out. And sometimes we love the scoop because we know we were built our family was built off the guys that put long hours in the day. And I think personal training, man, you're up at the crack of dawn, you have a long day, you got clients on the book, you're feeling good. But how do you get out of the idea of, the first thing is, stop selling workouts and start selling results or selling programs, right? You're going to lose 15 pounds with this 12-week. But then all of a sudden you're trying to change that reward system again into, I'm going to build a team and these guys are going to help me make a bigger impact. But you're not getting that gratification of seeing that scoop every day, you know, living it through your team. So creating new communication avenues to talk to your team about, how is this job getting done, and really believing in that team to really execute the grand plan. And that's one thing about my brand. I've never wanted to call it, you know, Frankie Guerra Fitness. It was always No Doubt Fitness. I wanted to put my team. And I remember I made that statement one time, and on the front door of our building was a shirtless picture of me, and it said, no, you know, Team No Doubt or No Doubt Fitness. And my trainer's like, man, you say we're a team, but you still got your picture. And I like tore it down immediately. I'm like, no more, you know, Frankie's not the face of this. And,
Yeah.
but how do you still scale your image as a trainer, as a fitness entrepreneur, in your beliefs, where we can really expand it, let everybody have that cascading effect? I know you mentioned you had a daily call today. So when you guys hit that, is there a mantra or an idea that you guys are trying to execute like every time? And do you guys go over that within your organization?
We don't do a good job of that now. Really, what we're trying to hone in right now is metrics for each team. So Mike, right now in our breakdown, it is Mike is mainly over the acquisition side of the company, right? So like bringing in new people, selling them, you know, getting leads, all that stuff. I handle everything under the fulfillment umbrella. So like once people are in, it's my job and my team's job to make sure that their, you know, customer service is taken care of, make sure that they're onboarded quickly and efficiently, make sure that questions are answered, make sure they stay on, right? So he's get them in, I make sure they stay in. So we've really been trying to hone in, what do the playbooks look like for each side of the business, and what do the KPIs look like that we're trying, that each side needs to care about in order to get to our broader goal of really just growing the company. You know, we think that we can get, we have certain metrics that we think that we can get to with profit margins, efficiencies, churn rates, top line revenue that we can get to with the current team size that we have right now, that will allow everybody to be happy, be compensated well, which is ultimately the goal. But our daily huddles, we don't have like a significant like mantra that we're kind of like huddling around. It's mostly right now it's KPIs and trying to hone in that type of stuff.
I feel you. I feel you. And that's one thing that I think, you guys have already been in business for a good while. You've already had your coaching business for how long?
3 years.
3 years. So I
Yeah.
mean, that's 1,000 days.
Mm-hmm.
That's 1,000 days, man, of just executing the
Yeah.
same thing. And culture is already created. You've done a great job of that. Everybody I see that you engage with, they love your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I traveling here the last day and a half, man. I listened to your first podcast. I listened to probably the last 5 or 6. I knew I got at least 12 hours in. So I was like, if I'm
Wow.
going to see Baker, I'm going to like make sure
That means a lot.
I do my due diligence. But it's interesting to know that somebody can consume your vision through a podcast, through a
Mm-hmm.
post, and have all of this. I think, yeah, you talked about him a minute ago, Alex Hermosi. He mentioned by the time somebody does business with us, they've already consumed over 100 hours of our content.
Yeah.
And it's so different. Even if you look back in like, the biblical era, God always, he gave stories and people consumed those stories and then they shared them because they were little tidbits. They were the trending TikToks of today. And I think now we're just able to get that information out over and over again. And I think one thing, I don't think a lot of people value what you guys are doing as far as those daily huddles because your clients are on there as well.
On the office hours one, yeah. So we
Yeah.
have team ones and then we have office hours, which is office hours is like people are hopping on and asking anything software related or coaching related that they just need help with outside of so it gets a little bit confusing. Office hours is like, we don't have a specific topic. Come in here and get help with anything that you need.
FAQs
Yeah.
today.
So we have like 5 of those, 6 of those a week that are just open for people to come. And then we have like actual coaching calls, like every Tuesday night, we have a coaching call on specifically social media. We're going to talk about social media. Paula is going to be your main point of contact. She's going to educate. I'm usually like secondary, coming on and filling in some gaps and helping people out, managing the chat and all that. Thursdays, typically I run some sort of call on sales. So we'll do sales role play. We'll do some sort of like coaching on the psychology of sales.
Objection overcome.
Yes, all of those things. So those two are set topics that every single week people can register for those calls and come in. And if you're a client of AR, you get access to that. And then we have the office hours. That's like anything under the sun. We're making ourselves available for this hour a day, 2 hours a day for you to just come in and just get help.
And see, Baker, I think that right there is showing your mantra that you're willing to be fully transparent. Let them talk, because you're not just having one guy on there. You're having anybody that can just be like, "You guys lied to me," or "I was a flip and swap," or "You guys switched this on me." So that's huge that you guys are willing to just have that, because I think a lot of times people don't want to put their brand out there where they can get feedback. Like you said, your buddy that just tore through your videos. So not only are you doing that personally, but as a company, you guys are letting your clients communicate with you and say like, "Hey man, I can't figure this out." And I always try to get on those calls myself where I can listen at other people's FAQs, because sometimes we're not there yet, right?
Yeah.
And then you're getting to learn secondhand. And yeah, it's great to be a smart person, but a really wise person can learn from somebody else without having to touch the stove and be like, "Mom said this was hot," and goodness, it is hot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that sometimes you don't know the right questions to even ask, and so hearing other people ask them can help out to spark something else inside of you. I think it's super interesting that you have the background that you have, and hearing you interface with Mike, the times that I've heard you interface with Mike, hearing you like just talking to you in Orlando. First of all, the fact that you even listen to an hour of me talk is impressive. But you have this rule that I think is super interesting, and I remember I'm starting to notice a lot of the things that I think Mike is like coming up with, and maybe he is coming up with it and you're taking it from him, but I'm assuming it's probably coming from you now, hearing you talk. He has this thing, and I know you have this thing because you told me about it at Coaching Con, and you ask a question in front of those 500 people, is you always ask a question when you are at events.
Always. Yep.
Tell me about that role.
Yeah.
And
So,
did you come up with that, or did Mike? Because Mike's taking credit to me
oh, Mike,
before.
that we're gonna go to toe to toe. So, I'll be honest with you, and I hope one day it gets to make Alex's ears. So, went to an event where Alex was going to be at, and I paid top dollar for the tickets, and had about 3 months before, and every client that I've had. So my clients, every client's a blessing to be in the room with. I mean, I just get to bounce ideas off, and sometimes they should be charging me. But
Mhm.
I asked them. I said, "Man, I'm about to meet a guy, same age as me, went to college 3 hours from where I went." And dude's doing $100 million a year, making a huge impact, helping people create their dream. And I was like, I'm going to ask him a question. And I was like, what's a great question? And so literally for 3 months, I asked every single one of my personal training clients. And
Mhm.
I'm talking about, if we were to put all these guys in a room, it's over 90 billion. I mean, these guys, super smart, um, different walks of life. And they all just kind of, they had different things. They wanted to know, what are you trying to solve? And what would you want to know? And so I had a handful of ideas, and nothing really sat well that I was like, this is going to be the question. So we go to this lunch, and I'm like, this is the chance. And they're like, hey, we're all in line to get this lunch. And they're like, we're going to have microphones set up, and Alex is going to answer, your questions. And so I'm eighth in line. There's four people at each one of these mics. And man, I run up there, and I'm getting ready, and he did something I've never seen. He has a whiteboard, and he says, I'm not going to answer your questions individually. I'm going to let you ask it. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to categorize it, and then I'm going to answer them all at once. It's like, okay. And everybody is there at these conferences most of the time to grow their brand or to grow their wallet, right? They want to achieve some accolade of success, a monetary number, whatever that might be. So all of it was like, we're trying to build millionaires, and you could stand on stage if you hit a million and all this stuff, and which I think is great. That's the undeniable proof that I think a lot of us need.
Yeah.
And we get to this point where everybody that's getting mic'd up and asking questions, they immediately are like, man, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much in this. And I can see like Alex is like accepting of it, but I think he really wanted to help us. And him getting gratification wasn't helping us. He's like, I get it, but like you guys already paid. That's ultimately like the ultimate gratification I
Yeah.
can get. And he wasn't getting frustrated by any means, but one person ahead of me was the last call, the last question. And the girl was like, hey, I can write your question down. And he answered what the question was, what I was going to ask. What was he trying to do now? What was he trying? Not, I know he was trying to hit a certain financial goal, but what was his biggest problem he was having while he's trying to give us information on how to solve $1 million problem? What's $1 billion issue? Because he always says, solve rich people problems, they pay
Yeah.
better. And I was about to give her the question, and I realized for me not to ask this question is the opportunity within itself. That was the answer I needed. And I realized he needs more time. And a lot of times we can build all these skills, but we don't have the opportunities that are rewarding enough or give an ROI that we need. And so it's now a time game. And you always hear that, right? Like you ask a millionaire, like, what could you have back? And he's like, your youth. And would you
Mhm.
trade that for anything else? And it's just to have more time. So I never gave her it. I never gave her a question. She looked at me. She's like, you're an idiot. She's like, you have the opportunity to ask Alex Ramosi your question, and you're not going to ask it. And I was like, no, I need to be the one to ask it.
Mhm.
And that way I could elaborate on that. And so I remember he answered all the questions that these 8 people had within a moment. So I promised myself, no matter what room I was in, that I would ask a question, because one, it's going to get you top of mind aware to ask, again, or at least, man, I would hate to miss that shot, to not take that opportunity
Yeah.
that maybe somebody else would have had. So when I went to that coaching con, and I was determined, and it's funny, it's the one day I didn't wear like my no doubt shirt or whatever it might be, and I remember the three guys that were on stage. It was Jason from Coaching Con. It was Kale from Gym Launch, and there was another guy there.
I think it was Brad Jensen, if I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
right. Yeah.
tatted up, super swole
Yeah.
dude. And I remember they were talking for like 10, 15 minutes, and they like look out into the crowd, and they're like, "Do you have any questions?" And I was like, I just backstory, it took me 36 hours to take a 2-hour flight. So I'm like, I gave this up. I almost didn't get on the plane because I
Yeah.
was only going to be there for a day and a half. I didn't have the proper staff at the time to get into it. And I was like, man, maybe this is a sign. Like, I don't need to go. So I'm like, I'm going to squeeze this thing for all it's worth. And I tapped a mic and I was like, hey, I need you to record this for me. And he's like, what are you about to do? I'm like, I'm going to ask a question and get my value out of this. I already missed a day with some great speakers. And I got to ask my question. And I asked Cal and the team and Jason, like, what's a $1 billion problem that they're trying to solve at their level? And how do we know that we're asking the right questions? And one thing I've always believed in, the quality of your life is based off the quality of your questions. And man, for a long time, I was always trying to find somebody that I wanted to mimic or be like.
Mhm.
And I believe I told Paula this. NCI, the coaching con had a lot of guys from NCI, and they have an online brand. And man, I'm not. You know what lifestyle arbitrage is? Have you ever heard of this word? So I've heard it a couple of times online, but the idea is, could you live in a place that costs you less money just to live? And a lot of times doctors do this. They'll live in another country or practice in another country, make all their money, and then live somewhere that's dramatically different. And so this year I got to go on a bucket list trip to go to Panama, the country. And I've heard a lot of people go there for like $36 a day. You can have a cook and a maid, and like they live, pretty nice in these nice
Yeah.
homes. But it's a 4-hour flight from my closest airport, same time zone, no natural disasters, no earthquakes, no tsunamis, none of it. And so I was like, let's go check this place out and see if we can, be a trainer there. And so to do that, I know I'm kind of wandering, but
You're good.
reel me back in. But when I turned 30, my goal was to hire 30 coaches to teach me a skill set.
Mhm.
So I wanted to learn how to make sushi. So on a cruise, we hired a chef and he showed us how to do that, and we got a little certification. I wanted to become a helicopter pilot. So that one took the last 2 years, finished that actually 4 days ago, a year ago.
Nice.
So got to go through that. But my goal was, if I were to be placed into another area, another country, my dream was to still stay in the fitness realm, offer helicopter tours around that area, fly the wealthy to their yachts, and then train them on their yacht. So doing the same stuff I do while maintaining my business, and doing that 10 days out of every month, living this other lifestyle and
Wow.
world. But it'd be all through social media. I'd have to create a brand around that. And so when I went to Coaching Con, a lot of these guys are extremely successful. I saw some of the guys hit the stage that use y'all service with
Yep.
AR,
Yep.
and I was like, man, like, what do their lives actually look like? And I remember one of the first conferences I went to, a guy received an award, or like with the ClickFunnels thing, and we met at a mixer that night, and he was doing like 150K a month, and I'm like, dude, what's life like? And we shared numbers, and he's like, dude, I live in my gym. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, no, I like don't have the money set aside to go like pay my own bills. I just live there. He's like, I'm lucky to clear like 3,200, 3,500 a month. And I'm like, at 150K, his insurance was like 25K a month. He was attached to a bar, and it was just crazy
Oh
stuff.
my gosh.
And I was like, man, but like I looked up to this guy for months, getting into it. And I was like, man, he was looking up to me and he was honored to be in my presence. I'm like, dude, like I'm digging you. And so I'm always looking at that. And man, I've never shared this with anyone, but I'll give you something that I wrote coming back from that last conference that we met at. And let me see if I can pull it up real quick. And so it was interesting. Since COVID, I think for anybody was a crazy 2020 year. It was the first death in my family. We rebranded our whole business. We sold half of my studio, just crazy stuff. But I wrote this to myself on the plane ride back, and this was the first time in about 1,000 days I've been able to sleep on an airplane. And it used to be like the best place to take a nap. But I wrote this: to my once doubtful self, I have completed the case study comparison of my life and other ideas, lives, and Instagrams. What I learned is everyone that gives you all their details of fun of their social media life don't actually have that much fun. Because when you're really having fun, the fun doesn't wait for you to capture it. It's too busy enjoying fun. My mindset is key in staying in a flow state of gratitude. I need to sell my own life to myself every glorious day. My life is only bad or in disalignment when I declare that idea to myself. Now I give myself permission to make the most out of it. And I've tried to read this every day.
It's
And when I wake up
powerful.
anxious, man, like I just like immediately I'm like, thank you for this problem. Thank you for it. And I think Joe Rogan, the guy he always has on there, I can't think of it. And he talks about like, dude, I just lost, this big client. And he's like, good. He's like, but man, I'm having these relationship issues. He's like, good. And everything he's just like, it's good. And it's like, been trying to stay in that flow state of just, yes, this is happening for me, not to me. This is happening for me, not to me. And even as a young personal trainer, I remember forgetting to take a turkey out. I didn't know if you didn't know this. This will give you a little tip. You're supposed to take your turkey out several days before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And I was told that, and I didn't because I was like, let it thaw out that morning. I'm the
Yeah.
meal prep king. I know what I should be doing.
Yeah.
Sure enough, no, you're supposed to do it days before. So I snuck out on Thanksgiving morning to find a Walmart or something that had a thawed out turkey. And I passed by another gym to a trainer that I knew, and he's there on Thanksgiving Day at 5 in the morning. And I'm like, dude, I would hate to be him. Psh, having to sell a holiday. And fast forward, to a decade later, waking up now on Thanksgiving and holidays where clients and they ask, like, hey man, can I come in and work out? Like, my cousin's coming and we got some bad blood. They're going to be in my house. And I just need that release. I need to make sure like I'm right. Like get that workout in, get those endorphins pumping. And it went from I would hate to be the guy waking up to how grateful it is to be the guy that people want
Yeah.
to be with.
Yeah.
Because at the end of a session or at the end of this exchange, you're not giving them a laptop or car keys or anything they can really cash out. You're just giving them your presence and how great it is for somebody to just want to be in that at such a raw time in their day on a holiday where they can just get a break, invest in them under your guidance. And it's just funny how we start putting these little pieces together of, man, that's what I really want. Where I was like, man, slumming it up in the morning, that's not what I want to do. So it's those little moments that you realizing you're maturing, but really figuring out what do we want out of our own life. Because if you believe you're rich, then you are. And I remember, up to this point, we've never hit $1 million a year in revenue in personal training. And by accident, I was doing some numbers not too long ago, and I clicked back the software that we track. We've done $8 million in the last little over a decade of business. So we've never had $1 million a year. And I remember my dad was on a call one day, and the guy's like, "Man, I just want to be a millionaire. I just want to be a millionaire." And my dad like spat it out. He's like, "Man, my son's a millionaire." And I like looked at him. I'm like, "No, I'm not. I don't have $1 million in the bank." And he's like, "What does it mean?" I was like, "Oh, I don't know." I'm like, "I've probably made a million mistakes." He's like, "Great. You know it." The only reason why we try to use that as a target is because that's what that undeniable stack of, you know, of worth is, and it's funny when we start realizing like, man, I'll give you a little tidbit into the book I'm writing. It's how to be the world's worst trainer, just straight up, and that's what it's titled. And the idea is like how to just suck. And whenever I travel, I hire a trainer. I was trying to hire one while I was in town. Here, just couldn't get away. But I try to always hire a trainer, whether it's on a cruise ship or a hotel, because I always leave with something, whether
Hmm.
how to improve my service, how to redefine. Like we don't pull out our cell phones when we're training somebody because they don't know what you're doing. They don't know if you're, belittling the time you have with them
Yeah. They don't
or
know if they're looking at the next thing that you program for them or
you
if
got it.
you're texting your girlfriend.
Right. And so I'm like, have a laptop. It looks more professional. That way they see it through and through, or at least tell the client, hey, I'm waiting on this emergency call from my family or whatever that might be. But it's funny, like, dude, and one thing I want to make sure that the listeners for today, we both probably heard it within the last month of to be the top 1% of podcasts. You got to do 21
Hmm.
episodes. And dude, what are you at today?
This will be 25, I believe.
Dude, you're 1%. I mean, and it's crazy to think that, like,
Yeah.
if you were to like have your car wrapped, the top 1% podcast, all of a sudden people would view you as that.
Hmm.
And I think we don't realize, do you realize the average person within 22 years has made $1 million, 22 years, but we don't have it stacked up. If you make 40 grand for 22 years, dude, you made a million. But how little times we realize, like, oh, I did that. Just the time horizon was so long. And, sometimes we have the inability or discipline to stack it because we were spending it little by little. And I wonder what that looks like for us now. What are the things that we've learned how not to do well, and the little things that we've been able to sharpen our craft and really go like, I do this one thing pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so many things there that I want to unpack. The the hedonic treadmill, I think that's the right word. The treadmill of just like the goalposts are always moving. That's something else that Hunter kind of talked about. I talked about last week. Um, I remember being on a phone call with my dad 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. It feels like a lot longer now, just because how time moves. But 2 years ago, and I had gone through and I had calculated up the amount of money that I had made with training, the amount of money that I had made with this supplement company that I was running at the time, and then the amount of money that I made with my fitness equipment company, and in its first year, and I'm in college, and I had just moved to Texas, and all these things happening. It was all cool, but I remember calculating it all up, and it was like $35,000. And I remember calling my dad and being like, Dad, with businesses that I freaking made, like I made $35,000 this year. How cool is that? Like that's all. And he was like, that's awesome, man. Like I have great parents, but I remember being so thrilled about that. And now like looking back, like the things that I learned to get me to the $35,000 combined between three different businesses for a year, like every new business since then, or every new opportunity, I've been able to take that in, and I like 35,000 might be like the floor now, right? That you're coming in at. And now, if AR had a $35,000 month, like we'd be in trouble, and that's crazy to just be thinking on like 7-figure
That
levels
was what the
now.
goal
Like,
was. Now
yeah,
it
yeah,
won't even
yeah.
feed you.
That was the goal for a year. And it, it always reminds me, if I can look back at the comparison game is so real on social media, because everyone posts their wins. Like you said, no one's going to post like their bad days. The good people are always going to show you a real insight into their life. And so if you're not willing to admit that 2 years ago you had three businesses combined do $35,000, like if that's not something that you can look back on and be like, I was genuinely excited about that at one point in my life, like very excited. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world that people had spent their hard-earned money with me, and I had accumulated $35,000. My businesses had, and that means I made way less for everybody listening. But I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And now just like understanding that anytime that you feel like you are on that level 10 or 15 or 20, and you're comparing that someone else is level 50, remind yourself like what you told yourself a year ago that you wanted. For me, at one point, it was like, if I make $10,000 in a month, like personally make $10,000 in a month, my life is going to look completely like that's it. Like that's like the pinnacle, like you see that on everybody's ads now, like make $10,000 a month, and your life's gonna be like, that's business. You're doing real business now. And I remember the first time I made it, and I kind of like looking around, like nothing changed,
Yeah.
like it's not a you always think that it's going to be this huge deal, and it can be the same thing with fitness, setting a bench press goal and then finally hitting it after trying it. Like nobody's going to be, you think people are going to be like clapping for you as you
Yep.
walk down the hallways
You
now. And
made
so,
it to the
yeah, you
club.
did it. And it's just not the case. And so, like what you're talking about is you're really trying to just accumulate the little failures, the little lessons, the little, I always equate it back to tools. Like how many things can you just put in your sheath, right? Like in your little arsenal to be like, now whenever I encounter this problem, I faced that 2 years ago during my $35,000 year, and now I can pull that out and I can use that for this situation, and I come down a little bit further down and I've got another problem that I'm facing. I faced that last year, I can use this tool. And so it is just it's a compilation of just taking things that you fail at, that you learn at, that you do, that you just subject yourself to. That's the most important part, is just getting in the game. Like, can you subject yourself to enough stuff to learn enough stuff to stay consistent and do it? And it's sad that 21 podcasts is like considered like 1%, because
Bar is low, man.
yeah, mine haven't done any numbers or anything, but considering just like the body of work that I put out and just where the bar is at, that technically puts you there. And so it's crazy to think that just doing that next thing, just doing the next day of work, just doing the next workout, just doing the next podcast, continuing to just go and go one more, which is like the Ed Milet thing. Eventually you find yourself among like where you said you wanted to be at some point in your life. And I think that's the coolest thing ever, is just by continuing to do the thing. It's the only way to actually get to the thing that you're actually wanting to get to.
Wow. We're always moving the ceiling and we're moving the floor. And like you said, 35 grand, man. That's a salary. That's
Yeah.
somebody's salary. And you did it as a hustle. But so two things. One, celebrating those wins. And then two, staying hungry, but also teaching yourself to delay it. I remember I renovated a huge house, 6,600 square feet, and I thought I made it. And man, it was the most miserable time of my life. It was just so much to manage. And I remember when I moved out of there, I was like, what am I going to do next to like level up? Do I get a 7,000 square foot house? And man, I live in a condo now, 3-story condo. It's like little shotgun levels. And it's probably a fifth the size. And it's on the water, man. There's only 5 of these in my town. And I love it. I pay an HOA a month and they cut my grass. I can literally just leave, lock the door, and I'm gone. Like, it's the most minimal maintenance. And I realized, I'll never forget, one of my clients, super country dude, built a business from a wheelbarrow, did a construction company, sold out for 13 million. First guy I've ever personally met that like self-made, sold out. Like, he's like, I sold everything but my shirt. I was like, man. And he told me that one day. He's like, you need to minimize the things you maintain. And at the time when I had that big house, man, I had 3 or 4 rental properties and I'm cutting grass on the weekends and all that. And it's like time that I think I should be doing stuff. And now, I travel more than I ever have. And I always try to correlate into some realm of fitness, whether it's a conference or an event or something to sharpen my craft. But I don't feel like we celebrate those moments of getting knocked down a notch. Or even, I had a guy that he inherited some great wealth and he was going to Disney World. And I was like, how did you do all 4 parks in a day? Like, super park hopper. He's like, no, it's a VIP tour. And they'll like take you around. You skip the lines. Like, you have to have 10 people. You pay them by the hour. You have to do minimum. And he's like, they literally lay out the whole day. And I'm like, you rode everything once? He's like, no. He's like, we rode some things like 6, 8 times. I say, but how did you know that? Like, how did you get the book on like success? And they give you all the cheat codes of like how to enjoy these luxuries. And he's like, I didn't. He's like, honestly, somebody told a friend of mine that told me. And I was like, and they flew like private there. And I was like, how did you get the jet? Like, is it a 1-800 net jets or whatever?
Yeah.
And he's like, no. Then I met somebody else. And he's like, you're just now in different rooms and the appetite is so much bigger. He's like, what bothers me is, when's enough? So when I was working in China, I met a lot of Asians and stuff. And when they'd come to the States, my job was to host these guys. And I was kind of the young buck. And we would do KTV, which is like karaoke TV. And sometimes we would go out to casinos and they would play baccarat, which is a baccarat, as we say in Alabama, baccarat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 007's game. So I always thought it was cool as a kid. And it's a majority Asian-based game. And I remember the first time I put out a black chip. Now, you gamble at all, Baker? Okay, cool. Don't do it.
Yeah.
I put out a black chip and it was $100 and I was like shaking. And at that point, it was the most I ever gambled. And I won. And I thought like, man, this is going to be like, I got like a cheat code. I just know like my aura is going to change these things.
Yeah.
Of course, I lost immediately after. And one day I won like $25,000. It was crazy. I remember
That's
like
insane.
it was insane. Like, I mean, it was more money than any of my businesses had ever made. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is going to be my job. I'm going to be a professional baccarat
Yeah.
player. And the Asian culture, they were super, like, I don't want to say suspicious, but like they believe, not like voodoo, but they were like, they believe in like good aura, like good karma, I guess.
Mm.
And so a lot of times I'd be losing, but the guy next to me is winning, and he would pay me just to sit there. He's like, you still, they call it driving the deck. And I remember the guy next to me, he was the same age as me, and his family owned a bunch of restaurants there. And he told me he had gotten up a couple years before, like 660K in a year, right? I'm like, what are you doing here? And he said the next year he lost like 670K. And he goes, you know what's scary? I now put out $1,000 chips, 2,000, 2K chips. And he's like, I don't shake. And he goes, that's when you need to walk away. Because no, you need to like fast. You know, you need to go without any of this or change
Yeah.
what your reward system is. And I remember that. I was like, man, when you start realizing like the dollars don't change anything, it's just your appetite and just really staying in that state of gratitude, really being gracious for
Yeah.
like all the things you have and all the trials you went through, and just like, man, you've done this podcast, 25 times now. Even if it's just an hour podcast, dude, that's a full day of just like, and I know I was asking you about this and kind of how your setup was and how much time you take, and you get more efficient at it. But how cool is it that you've already built 25 hours that 1% of people wouldn't even attempt, 99 wouldn't even go these lengths.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, like, I'll give you one last tip as we go into this gratitude. So when me and my girlfriend, we travel, we did long distance for about a year and a half. One thing we would do when we get together, I would airplay our last trip. And I would try to airplay it in like a Western dingy, like vintage look,
Hmm.
as if it was so long ago, even though it was a trip that we might have made a month ago. And we would just sit there, and like I would plan all these like weekends out, and we'd do all this stuff. And the times we always valued the most was just reminiscing and recapping all of it. It was winning to us, spending
Yeah.
time
That's a cool
together.
idea.
And when I put that old tint on it, we love something once it's gone. We love I know me and Mike, we used to always laugh about like, he had a hoopty, a Honda. And this was like, we would lay in a blanket together because it would be 4 a.m. We'd do our fasted cardio. We'd have a blanket together. And like, I remember one day he like rear ended somebody and they had a ball hitch and it went into the bumper of his car. And like Big Mike comes and like separates the vehicle. And of course the driver's like, we don't have to call insurance. We're like,
Yeah.
nothing's wrong. It's all good. But how grateful, how good we had it and never knew. And we always talk about those hoopty days when it was like, man, how minuscule it was. But if you always go with that mindset of whatever tomorrow or next year's battle is going to bring is going to weigh as much as today, is
Mhm.
going to weigh as much as the conversation we have, and just celebrate it for everything it is. And I always love it when you book a reservation, like on Open Table. We booked
Yeah.
one last night. Went to a great place here in Dallas. And I always put, celebrating a birthday or celebrating. Sometimes I go to the length of like, just got out of incarceration, and like, until
Yeah.
you have somebody that's like, I've been incarcerated too. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
um,
Where at?
yeah. I was
Where'd you
like,
do
San
time?
Quentin. I was like, oh, not the right
Yeah.
one. But last night, the funny thing was the waiter had read that. And I told him, I was like, man, we really don't have a birthday. I just think it's a great reason to go out and celebrate every day. And he brought out our little girl candles on the cake. And she hated the cake, but she loved the candle part, right? We always love, and we remember that. And there was a lady I had that spent almost 20 years in her consult. She's telling me, over the last 20 years, my husband had cancer, and we just kept getting such bad news. And I realized it's time for me to focus on my health. I've diminished. She went into all this, and I was like, so what happened? And she's like, oh, remission. He's good. He's been out of cancer for like 5 years. I'm like, 20 years. You got bad news. 20 years of going to these hospital meetings at MD Anderson and spending every last dollar you ever made into all this. What'd you do to celebrate? And she looked at me like I had cussed her, and she was almost mad. But then she just started crying. And she's like, you get so used to having bad news after bad news that when you finally get the thing, you don't even know. You're scared to almost celebrate it.
Mhm.
And one thing I try to instill in my clients is like celebrate the wins. We have a wow bell at our studio that we ring when clients have lost a pound, and we all shout "no doubt" because if they don't know how to celebrate it, and we don't show them, when do we finally say like "job well done"?
Yeah. What I was getting at is I think one of the biggest things we have to be aware of with just humans in general is our nature to just get desensitized to anything that we experience more than once. I was listening to a Theo Vaughn podcast where he was talking to some people call them death investigators, like the people that come out from like the morgue to come and like collect a body basically and declare them dead and all that type of thing. And the guy was saying that the first week that he had on the job was super traumatic. And he didn't know if he was like cut out for all this. He didn't know if he's gonna be able to do it. But after that, it was just like his job. He just showed up to work and did all these crazy things and experienced these like crazy dead bodies and smells and gross stuff he's touching and all this. And it was just like his life from then on. But we are like nurses too. Another example, like crazy shit that they go through all the time. I have a lot of friends that are nurses, and they are experiencing the most wild stuff that would like shake most of us to experience and see, but they just do it. It's just like their job. Um, but it happens for us with good and with bad things. Like I told the 10K month story, like the first time I did it, like I thought it was awesome, right? Like it was really cool to see that and to like look at the bank account, look at the numbers and the reports and everything. But the next month it was like didn't really it didn't really hit me the same the next month. And then like if I didn't hit it though, that all of a sudden would hit me the same. But it's never as special as it is the first time, and it's never as traumatic as the first time that something bad happens to you either.
Start anticipating it.
Yeah, and so we just have a very acute, I guess, inclination to just get desensitized to things super easily. So with what you're talking about, I think it's very powerful what you're talking about with gratitude, because if you can just fall in love with the game of business or the game and the grind of fitness in general, all of a sudden it becomes a completely different thing for you. And it's not about always having great workouts. It's not all about always having like being the most shredded or winning the show or whatever. It's just like I compete because I love to compete. I run a business because I love trying to succeed in business, and the challenges that come with that. So I think it really is about figuring out how you can love the journey, but also being grateful that you even are getting to play in the first place.
And I think that's just winning, right? Like what makes that winning mindset? You just realize you're not winning on the same platform everybody else is. It's just making sure you made those 1,000 shots before the game, or made sure that you edited it the 9th time, like you said, and you're like, dude, I'm so tired of working on this one just to get that extra view or like. But when we create this, right? If it's so I pick 10 clients every week and I ask them, you know, if today was going to be your best day.
I actually had that written down to get to as well, that question.
Yeah. So if today was, I think I sent it to you, right?
Yeah.
So how funny. That's crazy. So I usually pick 10 people that client wise, or people I engage with throughout the day. And I said, if today was the best day of your life, what would need to happen? And a lot of times, I think even your response was kind of playful at the beginning.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks, they say like $1,000,000. And then I always ask, like, what would you do next? They have no idea. And for a while, I used to read on people that won the lottery. And, man, if they had like 30 grand worth of debt, within like 5 years, they lose everything and go more into debt than ever. And they've isolated themselves from their family. And you hear about them giving to their brother's husband, sister, whatever. And then that person becomes an alcoholic because they no longer had to work because you blessed them with too big of a blessing that they couldn't continue their day to day because all they knew was to work. And I feel like if we don't know to a T what winning looks like today, what the best day of our life looks like, how can the world produce it for us?
Yeah. How can I give it?
Like it's not going to happen. I just found out today you guys have the lottery. It's 126 million. I'm like, man, the only way to win is to play, right?
Hmm.
And I think so many times we're so scared to go and get the ticket or to play it or really just even know because we've only done what our parents have asked us
Yeah.
or what we thought. And I want to go back to your first podcast. You mentioned when you walked into the gym one day for basketball, there was a guy there, and he always had the perfect form and physique. And like we look at that, and we're like, man, he's got it all figured. Do you still talk to that guy?
Yeah.
You do,
Yeah.
cool.
He's actually deployed right now. He's a Navy fighter pilot.
Heck yeah, man. So still doing that perfect form
Yeah.
stuff. And it's funny, we look at that and we think about how perfect everything looked at that moment, but somebody else is looking at you the same way.
Yeah.
How is he carrying this out? How is he doing this? How is he traveling as much? How does he maintain this? Something's got to give. And I think sometimes we don't want to state what we really want because if we don't achieve it, and we got people, all over social media, Grant Cardone, 10 extra goals, because even if you don't, you hit 5 extra, still, hitting it bigger. But if we really said, like, this is what I want to do, and I'm not going to stop until I do so, and we declared that. I remember when I was with Mike and we decided to do a bodybuilding show together. I didn't really want to do it after like 90 days, but I had told so many people that I was like, man, I can't be that guy that doesn't say what he's going to do. And it was an unbelievable experience because nothing else can, like you were talking about earlier, nothing else in the gym somebody can lift for you, no matter what supplements you're taking, whatever you want to blame it on. Nobody can put in that work. You still have to lift that set. It's still your set. But we got to choose what winning is. And every day I think it changes. And I think we're scared to be like, winning yesterday was getting a great salesperson for me. And winning, the beginning of this year, I wanted to have 400 Google reviews for our business. We do great on Facebook, but not so much on Google. And when I had to go look at that first quarter's goal and then rewrite quarter two, when we've only got 67 more Google likes, I was like, man, I didn't hit that. But I got so distracted on other things. But I still feel like it was a winning quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about our appetite as far as the once upon a time goal is now our floor, and then that floor couldn't even be our next months paying that due. But is there something that you tell yourself that you see yourself kind of? It could even be a mindset trend that you see yourself going like, man, I keep seeing that I have this behavior throughout my life, or you see it other in your family. And I'll give you one that I've kind of noticed in myself. So I'm Cuban, and my family drinks Cuban coffee. And I'm not big on stimulants, as you can see. I'm drinking this 200 grams of caffeine. I'm like, man, I'm feeling the jitters. I like it.
Yeah.
But I wake up at 3:45 most days, and I used to believe that if I drink a cup of coffee in the morning, I'm going to have poor sleep that night because of that cup of coffee. And all throughout the day, I was already living in tomorrow, knowing I'm going to perform bad tomorrow because I'm going to sleep bad tonight. I've already got myself worked out, got anxiety about it, right? So we're in Panama, and we're walking around with my girlfriend. We drink some Panamanian coffee, which is some stout stuff.
Yeah.
Man, I'm going to tell you, like, it got some stuff done. They built a canal off that Panama coffee, okay? And I drink this stuff, and 30 minutes later, we go to sleep. And my girlfriend says to me, she's like, so how is it that on vacation you can drink a cup of coffee and go straight to sleep, but if you have it at 3:45 in the morning, that's 16 hours later, it's still affecting you? And I realized that was a belief that wasn't serving me. So ever since Panama, I've been drinking coffee every day and going to sleep fine with no anxiousness. But is there anything that you catch yourself saying or you hear other people around you saying that's like so empowering to the label?
Are you saying like beliefs that I held on to previously that I realized I don't need to hold on to?
Yeah.
I feel like I have a lot of those. Something that I find, or I've found the past 2 years that have been just completely squashed by doing 75 hard twice is like
So you did the 150.
the whole time. Yeah.
The whole 150.
Yeah. The whole time excuse, right? Like last year specifically when me and Mike were trying to like build AR, it was like 60, 70 hour weeks for a long time, like trying to get it to where it's kind of at. Not so much anymore, but I, I used a lot of like time excuses. Like I've got to be doing, these things on the business. I don't have time for relationship stuff with my now wife, and I don't have time for to go do an hour to 2 hour workout every single day. Like if I get in 20 minutes or 30 minutes, or if I can get my 5,000 steps for the day, because I don't have time for 10,000, like
Mhm.
I'm good. I think the time one was a big one for me. I think something that I have to constantly remind myself of that I do think is a negative is the pride thing. And I think a lot of it can come natural, just being a guy, being like growing up an athlete, being an entrepreneur. Like we all have kind of like it's actually studied that like we all have like somewhat of a superiority complex, like entrepreneurs do. Like I believe that I'm destined for more in life, or I'm going to achieve more. But also there's a very acute underlying imposter syndrome and inadequacy, like the very severe like insecurities that you have attached usually. And I think for me, that's a lot of what people always say, like Baker's so confident or so cocky. And it's always a joke in my family of like, of course Baker's gonna like gas himself up and say these things about, I'm always gonna make some sort of sarcastic comment about how I look or me being jacked or something like that. But there's also it comes from a place of me trying to be super prideful to cover up for any type of, like that's just how I learned to cope with my insecurities. Is like if I can make somebody laugh at something, or make them crack a smile, or make them think that I'm projecting this vision out, then they're not thinking right then about the thing that I don't want them to think about. So I think that's kind of like a movie that I project out towards people, or like
Defense mechanism.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's something that I put out there that I always catch myself in. And I've started to get comments recently of like, you always talk about how you're prideful, but you're also always like knocking yourself down a peg and like saying humble things. But that's part of my practice for combating it, really, is if I can let enough people know, and let people know, and like, especially a long form content like this is something that I deal with. And although you may see whatever that I want you to see or try to project or whatever, these are very real feelings that are happening under the surface, that this is why I am the way I am, and I'm actively working on it. And I think that's an important part of it. But that's definitely a script that I kind of put out there in the world, that I'm always catching myself in, telling myself that like you have to be this picture of an entrepreneur and a man and a alpha male and all these things for people to respect you, love you, and think of you a certain way, versus being this version of myself that I'm trying to be on the podcast, which is a more genuine version of myself, more real and raw version of myself that people can actually relate to, right? It's not somebody that feels unattainable or unrelatable. It's like a real raw human being, like we all are, whether we want to admit it or not.
Undeniably you. We might have to call that version of you the Baker Shield. You know, you're
Yeah.
putting up that shield, and I think we all do that. And it's funny, we look at our brand, right? The things that we've told ourselves, told others. And I want to say mine was always the same way. Like I always wanted to be funny, Frankie. I just wanted to make people laugh. And I
Yeah.
thought that way you could kind of, I thought the best place to be in any kingdom was always the jester.
Hmm.
Think about it. You get to be pulled in the middle, you put on your performance, you make everybody laugh, you make everybody feel good, but also you're listening to a lot of stuff being in that courtroom, listening to the kings talk,
Hmm.
listening to, the disputes. You're there for the halftime and sometimes the best time of the event. But I think we all do that. We're reinventing ourselves. And let me hit you with this one. A lobster, right? So like I use this a lot with my staff, but a lobster, by the time that it reaches our plate at a restaurant, at a five-star restaurant, it's shed its shell at least 20 to 25 times. So to do that, when baby lobsters, crawling around, it's got a little shell just a little bit larger than itself to protect itself. But then as it grows and it gets a little bigger, it starts getting a little uncomfortable. It starts putting pressure against the shell. So it's got a decision to make that if it wants to grow, it has to become extremely vulnerable. So what it does is it buries its way underneath the surface, finds a safe spot, and it literally disassociates itself from that shell. So now you're talking about completely bare. I mean, you're open to any predator, and it repeats that process 20 to 25 times.
Mhm.
And I think so much of that, we think that growth is like the shield or the shell is moving with us.
Yeah.
And the reality is, it's actually a point of extreme vulnerability. And I think sometimes that's what allows you to fill out the next shell. You know, you mentioned marketing and how it's changed. I was working for one of the largest special effects company, and they're like, "We need you to get more people to answer emails." So I was like, "Okay." And one of my favorite people is Robin Williams, and I mean, I think everybody has at least one, if not a handful of movies. And he had passed away, and this company was trying to move some closeout items, and they had done some films with him before. And so I decided, you know, this is 19, 20 years old, thinking I know the world. I send out an email blast to like 40,000 emails saying that in honor of Robin Williams, we are doing a sale on these products, which is completely unsensitive to the situation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And he was tied to some great philanthropy events, and uh, we were tying to those as well. But I never stated that in the email. And the phones rang, and we went from like a 3% open rate on emails to like 27%, which email, I mean, if you can get in the 20, if you can get in the five, is your gold.
Mhm.
And I remember they just started patching through all the calls, and I had to handle at 19, 20 years old, these people all around this industry. And I just remember how bad I messed up. And man, to this day, like when I see a Robin Williams movie, I'm like super overjoyed, but there's always this like part of me that I feel like, man, I was given a platform and I didn't represent it correctly. And luckily, we were able to raise a lot of money for those benefits. But 2 or 3 days had passed, and the CEO never reached out to me, never told me like, "Hey, you did okay," or you know, "Man, I hate you, you're fired." And the president of the company I worked for was on the call. It was me, the president, and the CEO, and he's like, "Man, what's been our previous open rate?" And I forgot whatever it was. It was less than 5%, 3%. He said, "What was the open rate of this email?" I'm like, 27. I was like, "How uncomfortable with those calls?" I was like, "Oh, dude, it was miserable." Even the president was like, "I wouldn't even answer them." And he was like, "But you got people to call and know us again. Good job." And I was like, "Good job." I'm like, "Do you realize I haven't slept in 2 days? Like, I'm never hitting the send button again."
Yeah.
And for the most part, I don't remember if I ever did again. I don't think I ever did in that position, ever hit send. I'll tell you one thing, been owning this business for 13, 15 years. I've never sent out a monthly newsletter. Most of it because I've always dealt one-on-one, so I could just text that person the message if it was 150 clients I was training at the time. But it is interesting to think that your content will be in places you might not ever be in rooms you might not ever step foot in, and it is written in ink. And my little girl's going to hear that one day, what we're saying in here, as she sits outside on her iPad for the last hour and a half. But it's interesting to think about how everybody else is going to view that content. And we might have thought of it as, man, I was just trying to be funny or tear that
Yeah.
down or just be mean. And one thing I've made myself do is now when I do consults, I used to always start them the same. So tell me, I'm going to improve your credit score, make you taller, and get you the best GPA. What are your fitness goals? And I always started it. And now I have a roll of toilet paper that I put on my desk, and I tell them like, one of us is going to cry in this consult, but the other one's still going to be lying. Who wants to go first? And it went from like this bubbly, like showing around the studio, and I have my dog with me there, always Hazel, and I always just pause right after I say that. And I finally had somebody ask me about that. They're like, "Why do you do that?" And a lot of times, man, people come in with a heavy heart. They're like, "Yeah, I clicked on the ad or I did this or that." And then you get into that moment. And if they don't cry then, sometimes later on when we're training them, they'll be like, "Hey, I wasn't really honest with you." And the goal is not to get them to cry. It's
Yeah.
it's to get them to realize why they really came. And then that way it's a matter of an identity crisis we're trying to go through, whether it's the freshman 15 going through divorce or revenge bodge, whatever it is. We're trying to reinvent ourselves when we sign up for this fitness journey. And she said, what were we going to lie to ourselves about? And I was like, whatever you've been holding on this last little bit of time that
Mm-hmm.
isn't serving you. And I think that's that moment of not only stating that to them, but also to ourselves of like, hey, I've been holding this version of myself that is really scared.
Yeah,
And then when we're finally able to let that through, through ourselves and through others, that's when we can grow.
absolutely. Dude, such an introspective conversation, podcast, everything. I was asked one, and you know this by now, I was asked one question at the end of every podcast. What are you, Frankie Guerra, going to accomplish by any means necessary?
Man, gratitude. Gratitude's the attitude. And right now, no matter how bad it gets, I just want to be grateful for it. Or no matter how bad another 2020 can come through, or the loss of an employer, a loss of a client, or whatever it is, I just want gratitude to be the attitude. Because I think if I can have that mindset, then there isn't a bad day. There's just another way to learn to get better, hopefully for the next day. And I hope at the end of my time, however long that is, and I hope it's 105 years, outlive my great grandmother, that I can be grateful through all of it. Because the reality is, all those bad things that I, hated, whatever day it was throughout my life, brought me here to a room with you to have this opportunity. So I think just being grateful and just choosing it, it's a choice. It's not something that I'm going to find one day in a box or in a credit card or a bank account. It's just a mindset that we have to choose every day to be grateful.
I love that. Appreciate your time, dude. Thank you. I know you're busy and you guys are out here for the conference and everything, and you got a bunch of stuff going on back home as well. So appreciate you. Appreciate your
Well,
time
thank you,
and
brother.
just your brain. So
Shake
we'll
and
have to have
bake.
you on again here soon.
For sure. For sure.
Thanks,
Episode
man.
500.
Yes, sir. If you made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in to another full episode of the BAMcast. I know it's a longer one, but I hope that you guys got as much out of hearing that conversation with Frankie as I did participating in it. Super introspective, very, very, very insightful man, and absolute pleasure to just have him in person, even though we had all the technical difficulties with the lighting and everything. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the in-person feel and vibe. I know I did. So it just feels more connected to the guests. So if you do want to check out anything that Frankie has going on, I'm going to have that linked all in the description. If you want to check out anything that I've got going on and support the show on a deeper level, I'll have that down below as well. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes or even some of the clips that we're putting out on a consistent basis. And if you're listening on any type of audio platform, make sure that you follow the show to make sure you don't miss any updates. I appreciate you guys more than you know. Share the show if you got something out of it, even if it's just a timestamp. But I really, really, really am having a blast doing this, and I hope you guys are having a blast following along the journey with me. So appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.